All right. Yeah. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to today's meeting of the CSRIC, our third meeting of the council. And we'll meet again in March, but we'll talk about that some more later. There'll be a number of folks that join on the phone. There's not quite as many on the room, and I appreciate all of you with the hardy spirits to join us here. It's going to get cold later. And last time we met, I mentioned that the next time we meet, it would be holiday season, and it is. So the city has something to offer today. If you have a few minutes, get around, and there's things to see. We have a Christmas tree, I think, or a holiday tree to enjoy. So welcome. Today is the last meeting that we'll have where we won't have any votes. We'll have updates from all three of the working groups. And with that, I think I'm just going to turn it over to our chairman, Brian.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So, been quite a challenging year, I think, from hurricane and windstorm perspective, particularly currently ongoing in California, and really nothing underscores the mission, I think, of CSRIC more than some of those events that we've seen this year. So very happy to get us kicked off. We've got Mary Boyd from West Services, who is going to give us an update on Working Group 1. And we'll start there, I think.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also to extend our thoughts and prayers for California as well. We have been overrun this year with disasters. Budge Courier, who's on CSRIC Council and on Working Group 1, I was emailing him East Coast time, 6 o'clock this morning, and the gentleman was responding right back to me. So that tells me they are working day and night, and our thoughts are with them out there. A quick update on Working Group 1. Onto our first slide, please, sir. Thank you. So our actual objective reads something like a James Michener novel. It's that long. So I've taken the liberty of summarizing our objective overall. But basically, we are focused on the transition from Legacy 911 to NG 911, looking at enhancing the reliability, the effectiveness of that transition through routing, redundancy, and maintenance, and primarily to look at mitigating any risk as we move into that migration. In terms of, we're broken into two tasks. Task 1, on next slide, please. Thank you, is focused on the NG 911 transition. We have responsibilities to review the existing best practices and develop additional guidance regarding the overall monitoring, reliability, notification, and accountability in preventing 911 outages as we transition to NG 911 environments. Specifically, Work Group 1 has been asked to identify risk associated with the transition that could result in the disruption of 911 service and make recommendations to protect them, including recommendations for best practices and standards development. The working group will also study specific actions that originating service providers, 911 service providers, and other entities in the call chain should take to detect and deter outage precursors before the calls are delivered to an ESINet gateway. We are to focus on identifying tools that are already available, are not burdensome to implement, and on developing a set of best practices for carriers and 911 service providers. Our next assignment, on the next slide, please. Thank you. Task 2 is really focused on our small rural carriers. We're evaluating best practices for managing the transition to NG 911 for the small carriers, and specifically, we have to provide advice to them on how to operate within a state or region in order to be ready on time to deliver their 911 traffic in an NG 911 compatible manner. We're to look at the economic disadvantages that may impede small carriers as they implement, what barriers they may have to implementation, and if any, what the Commission should address. And finally, we are to recommend a NG 911 readiness checklist for the carriers, which would follow the lines of the checklist that was developed in the TOFOPA initiative in 2016, where we looked at NG 911 readiness in general. This would be specific to rural carriers. To give you just an update on where we are in terms of our membership status, I reported out at our last meeting. We were still waiting on a few additional resources, but we had identified our co-leads on the 2 tasks. Walt Magnuson from Texas A&M, Butch Courier with the state of California, Dorothy Spears Dean from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and Jim Gerke with the Texas 911 Alliance stepped up and volunteered to help provide leadership on these tasks. Our next slide identifies the current membership. I'd like to point out that since I submitted this to the Commission last week, we had received approval for Tom Breen from Comtech. You might recall, Council, that Mr. Breen, Terry Reese from Ericsson, and Bob Sherry were the co-authors on the technical document submitted to us from ATIS on 911 networks and NG 911 networks. So we were pleased that the Commission was able to provide us support with Tom Breen. And I understand also Terry Reese from Ericsson is being vetted, and we expect to have final approval on her as well. We have some additional resources that are coming in that will come into you as alternates. Nina, Trey Forgety for Nina, and representative on the council, has asked that Roger Hickson also be supportive on this initiative. Roger has an extensive background on 911 networks and is a valued member to be added. I've talked with Suzanne this morning. We'll get this officially transmitted to the staff, as well as Bob Sherry will be an alternate and one of the co-authors on that document, and he's from my company. So we have a full complement now for our work group, and I'm excited about that. We have a great blend between network architects, network engineers, and architects. I'll say that again real fast, which is needed in understanding the complexities of the legacy networks and moving into IP, as well as representation from our 911 government authorities. So I feel like we've got the right mix now to move forward. I'll give you a quick update on where we stand on with Task 1. For Working Group 1, we do have weekly meetings on Monday afternoons. Those have been established now for some weeks. We've identified that sub-teams that are going to be providing the research and drafting. They're looking at identifying the transitional risk and the demarc points in those networks, as well as the outage prevention and reporting tools. Yesterday afternoon, they reviewed their outline for the report and its content, which covers everything from call loss and risk, the reliabilities of the networks, the examination of the best practice and the findings, as well as any new best practices. The network performance tools will be certainly a section in that report. And we're also adding cybersecurity. As I understand, Working Group 3 is more high level, and Travis was telling me earlier that they will not deal specifically with 911 on cybersecurity, so we've added that to both of our task outlines and reports. So we'll work with you and partner Travis on that content. As our deliverables requested that we look at tools that the carriers use today to detect and deter an outage. ATIS through the NRSC has volunteered to administer the survey for us to the carriers. That's in draft form. I saw that come out late yesterday. We'll vet that, Mr. Chairman, and hopefully be out to the carriers by the end of the year. On Task 2, next slide, please. Thank you. Same schedules, Friday afternoon with Task 2, where we have also developed an outline. Last Friday, that was reviewed with a few modifications, and now we will move on to the actual drafting of the content. Just to give you some example on the content of that task, once again, defining the small carriers, for the report, but we're looking at interconnection requirements, the network elements, what points of interconnect they would deal with, particularly when it's subject to lattice. So we will go into a lot of detail on networks for small carriers. What IP interconnection is needed in an NG911 environment, SIP, petaflow, and then finally the last element of that report as it stands right now will include the readiness checklist. And the next slide is basically just to recap what our schedule is. We do have a monthly working group call the third Thursday of the month. That's definitely timely given the weekly activities that we have with both of the task groups. We're still on target for draft of Task 1, Mr. Chairman, in January. I'm optimistic, even though we've had a lot of work challenges. The paying job sometimes interferes in our ability to carve out time. I think we can all relate to that, but we are dedicated to rolling our sleeves up in getting this draft completed in January for Task 1, and then finally to the Council in March. The Task 2 report is not due until June. And on my final slide, we will continue to work on our outlines with any revisions, looking at the contributions that we've received from ADIS, doing the gap analysis on the best practices. We do believe there will be a lot of work on best practices that'll need to be done, and then the completion of the survey with the carriers on network outage reporting tools. So, Mr. Chairman, we will also continue to provide you periodic updates as we make progress, and that concludes our report for Working Group 1.
Thank you, Mary. This is very comprehensive. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank those members of your working group that stepped up to run those tasks. So thanks if you guys are out there on the phone. Appreciate the assistance there. So with that, I'll just open up for questions if there are questions in the room or on the phone. And if you're on the phone, you have questions, just shout out. And if you're in the room, just please raise your tent card. Don't really anticipate too much at this stage, but okay. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Farouk in person today, and he's going to use the podium. It's an option.
I can never make you look bad. So. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm Farouk Khatibi with chairing Working Group 2. I can use this thing. So the objective of Working Group 2 is twofold. One is to understand what are the different alerting techniques that we have and see if there is anything that we are missing, and I will go more details into the activities that we are doing towards that goal. And the second part is also understand if there are security issues with the alerting from the perspective of making sure that the alerts are originated from the appropriate authorized source. And that task we haven't started yet. We have had some discussion, but we primarily right now we are focusing on the first task. So that's what I'm here to explain. This eye chart that I could never read it myself has the Working Group 2 members that I really want to extend a thanks to everyone here, and I see a number of the members here today that been very, very helpful in progressing the work. Without them, obviously, we couldn't get the work done. And we have a couple of groups, 2 or 3 people who were really busy. We have an alternate, and I would like to thank Susan and Jeff for helping with those folks. So we have a pretty good composition of folks right now to get the work progressed. So there are, in a way of background, some obvious things critical to make sure that we have the relevant information, emergency information sent to the in a timely fashion to the targeted individual. Living in Southern California, just flew from San Diego, I can tell you how important these alerting emergency are to the people who are affected. I mean, getting the timely and location accuracy is very important. And then I see that from a personal perspective. So that's our objective. And we understand there are a number of techniques to disseminate the critical emergency alert. And our group is to look at the existing technology and see if we need to potentially improve them, and or maybe we can even think about a new technique to do it. So everything on the table, and we need to understand what is the best way to get the important information to the folks who need it immediately. So I kind of want to show you pictorially what we are trying to do. And, we have this existing emergency alert anywhere from VIA, ATSC 3.0, PBS, EAS, 5G. So there are a lot of activities going on. And what we're trying to do is look at all these elements and see if there is a way we can put all these pieces of puzzles together and see if there is a missing piece that we need, and see if there's something that we need to do to enhance it further. And then once we have that all the pieces together, hopefully we can provide the right technique to the public safety to make sure that they have the right tool to get the information to the people in a timely fashion. So there is this big picture, and I would like to thank one of our members from Cal OES who put this thing together. And I thought it was very useful to look at this big picture thing. And it's a lot of details, and I'm not going to go on. Don't worry, I'm not going to read every one of those columns and rows. But what it kind of shows, let me just explain the big picture of alerting system. On the top part, we are talking about what are the different elements end to end, starting from alert triggering to the alert composition to alert dissemination and alert presentation and alert integration. So those are the different aspects of end to end of the different players that we have to make this system working. And on the left side, we have some elements, often in past CSRIC that I was chairing and so forth, a lot of our focus was really on the technology, which is the lower row. But there are a lot of other things that we need to consider, procedures, human factors, policies and organization. So as we have been discussing, we would like to explain the whole picture of what this alert organization is all about and understand it, and we will describe this in our report. But at the end of the day, this is, if we want to address every one of these columns and rows, it's going to be like boiling the ocean. We're not going to be able to do it. So we had a discussion, and what we are planning to do is primarily focus on the last three columns. And this is complementary to other activities that's going on that they're addressing the first two columns. But our focus primarily is going to be the last three columns or subset of last three columns. But what we like to do is make sure that we are not duplicating an effort, and the work that we are doing is very relevant to the alert originators. So that is the work that we are doing, and we encourage everyone who had some thought about this thing, please feel free to contact me, because this is very important to make sure that we have the right focus. So we have met 7 times. We meet every other week. And we have completed. And so one of the first things that we did, going back to the puzzles, the picture puzzles that I show you, is that we went and did a survey of the existing technologies and techniques and so forth. So we had a very kind group of people, and we had some external folks who came and presented their technology and their techniques to us. So we gathered all that information. Now we are putting the puzzles together. So that has been our work so far. And also, I just want to mention that during the last meeting, there was a comment about the needs of deaf and hard of hearing, and so we agreed that we need to look into that. So that's going to be a section in our report, and we will definitely consider that into our way going forward. Last slide, the schedule. We are doing bi-weekly calls. And as I said, the calls are going really well. It's an hour and a half, but we often go overtime. We always go overtime because there's a lot of energy and good positive working attitude in the group. I really enjoy that. We have 2 reports coming up. One of them is in June and the other one in September. The first one about this reimagining, we have already drafted the report, and we have had sections that different members have agreed to lead that activity, which is really good because we have like a number of people working on different sections and leading it. And then we're also going to add additional text based on the discussion that we have forward. So the working activity is going very well, and I'm looking forward to our future work in this group. I'm sorry. So next step, complete the landscaping, developing a work plan, which we have done that. We have working group volunteers to lead different sections of the report. We continue our bi-weekly calls and provide, obviously, periodic status to the chair and the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Farouk. So somewhat of a cliffhanger with the missing component. So we'll have to. I guess we'll have to wait with bated breath to find out what that is.
This was the finale of this season.
Yeah. So tune in March. I guess we'll find out some more.
It's nice to have a little graphic. I like that.
Yes, it's a very great way to explain it. So let's start with any questions in the room for Farouk, as a great reader. Okay, and anything on the phone? And if I could remind you on the phone, just mute check, please. I think we heard some noise there during the presentation. Okay, so we're bated breath for the cliffhanger there to find out what happens next.
Thanks.
So last but by no means least today, we've got Travis Russell from Oracle, who's going to leading up Working Group 3 and give us a readout on that. So over to you, Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to apologize in advance. This beautiful city has stolen my voice, so hopefully I'll be able to pull it back in. I'm going to follow Mary's lead and kind of paraphrase a little bit what our objectives are. I think timing is perfect for us to be looking at security issues, not just in 3G and 4G, but as we start looking out towards 5G. And I think certainly when we see the activities within the research community, I think that this work is going to be very timely. We just saw, by the way, in Canada, where our favorite friends who were premiered here on CBS a few years ago, they just went to Canada on CBC and did their favorite script there for the Canadian citizens. So this topic, around SO7, around diameter, around SIP, it continues very strongly, and we're seeing globally there's a lot of focus being put on telecommunications within the research and hacker community. So we've got 3 deliverables that we have talked about in the past. First one, our focus is primarily going to be around the diameter protocol and its use within wireless networks. The second one will be looking primarily at the Border Gateway Protocol, BGP protocol, that's used for routing internet traffic. And I think you're going to find that one to be a pretty interesting report because we're seeing some rather interesting incidents taking place across the internet today. And then last but not least, then we will do a report on 5G and IoT. And I think by that time, we should see the work within 3GPP come to a close, and we'll have not just the architecture, but the protocols for 5G will be pretty well defined by that time. So I think that timing will be perfect. So focusing on task number 1, where we are right now, we're looking specifically at best practices for mitigating breaches, whether it be privacy-related or interception of sessions within the diameter protocol. So this is a carryover from the work of Working Group 10 and CSRIC 5, where we focused on the SO7 vulnerabilities and the ability to do certain things with SO7. We're now examining not just those use cases, but some additional things that have come to light because of the very nature of the diameter protocol and how it works. So that will be the focus of the report that we're working on right now. We have been able to add some additional working group members, so we're very happy to report that we have added 3 new working group members: John Marino, the CTIA, Jeremy Larson from US Connect, and I just got word this morning that Martin Dolly of AT&T are all now fully vetted and members of the working group. And in addition to that, we've had a number of the working group members have also had alternates vetted. So I think we have a pretty full working group now. I think that we have a pretty good complement of subject matter experts to move forward. So, I talked already here, I think, on the background, so I won't belabor that. I will say, I just came back from, I call it my whirlwind Asian tour, followed by my European tour. And those meetings were with both cybersecurity professionals as well as the hacker community. And again, I see there is an ongoing, very aggressive focus on telecommunications as a whole. It's the new frontier, if you will, for the hacking community. So we need to be diligent. We're continuing with our weekly conference calls. We've had 4 subject matter experts that we picked from the global community. Sergey from Positive Technologies in Russia. These are the guys actually that were responsible for originally disclosing a lot of the vulnerabilities that we give credit to the Germans for. So it was very interesting to hear Sergey's research on the diameter protocol and the work that they've been doing there. Alexander provided a view from a service provider perspective. Alexander used to be part of the hacking community, and he went to work for Post Luxembourg as a part of their red team. So we got some very interesting insights as to what they are doing in Europe in terms of red team analysis and penetration testing of the networks. Cathal McDade from Adaptive Mobile, he's spoken a number of times for a number of conferences and sessions, and in fact, he also spoke, I think, at CSRIC Working Group 10. So Cathal was able to share with us some of the findings that they have had as they go out and monitor networks and look for specific attacks. And then finally, just last week, we had Dr. Silke Holtman from Nokia Bell Labs. Dr. Silke and I work pretty close together, both on the SS7 side as well as on the diameter side, so it was great to have Dr. Silke present her research on the diameter protocol and some of the things that they've been able to evaluate in their labs. So I just yesterday put together sort of a summation, if you will, of those 4 presentations. We'll be reviewing that on Thursday so that we can look for some commonalities across those 4, I'll call them testimonies or presentations. In the meantime, there's been a lot of work done around diameter security within the GSMA community, and so we do have NDAs all in place now for any of our non-GSMA members to be able to receive those GSMA documents. We'll be sharing those starting this week as well. I see those to be pretty valuable because there was a lot of best practices that were defined in those documents that we'll be able to leverage rather than reinvent the wheel. And we have, as I reported last time, we've begun work on the report. The focus on the report so far has been mostly on the front matter. What is the diameter protocol? Why is it important? How is it used within the wireless community? I think we've got a pretty good foundation there. There's still some gaps I'll be looking to fill over the next couple of weeks, now that we have holidays and time off from day jobs. And we'll begin starting to focus on what the threats are, and then, of course, following that, we'll start focusing on mitigation, which is my next slide. So I will have to go through with the team, by the way, Suzanne, the rules, if you will, for sharing the GSMA documentations and how we're allowed to use that. So if you've got some insights to that, that would be helpful. So we're still meeting weekly. It's a bit of an aggressive schedule, but I think it's necessary for us to get to the finish line. I'm still holding fast on that date, March the 1st, for a draft. I did move that to the end of the month of March for the final report. That's my product management in me. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to move that up, but that's the date that we're going to be shooting for. And nothing has changed, I don't believe, on the other two dates for the other two reports. So now that we have some new members, obviously they have some catching up to do. So I'm going to be focusing on some sessions specifically for the new members, just to onboard them, get them up to speed on all of the presentations that we've seen thus far, so that they don't have to do a lot of reading on their own. We get them up to speed very, very fast. As I mentioned, we're going to get the GSMA documentation that's relative to this work. We'll get that out to the team this week and next week, and we'll be going through a summation and a review of those documents so that people can understand how those apply and what we'll be doing with those. And I'm hoping that we can get the first section of the report, all of the diameter background stuff, done here by the beginning of the year. And that's all I have.
So I presume through all the expert talks that you've had, is there a common theme coming out that you guys will focus in on?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I thank you, Travis, and thank you, members of Working Group 3. We'll just open up for questions if there are any today. And then on the phone? So just, Travis, just for your note, for your diary, so it's the project manager and me, not the... so March 29th date, if we can get that a couple of days earlier, that would be very beneficial for us. As we,
Do you have a date in mind?
I think Jeff will announce that date very shortly. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Jeff, to close.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. And thank you all again for coming. Next meeting will be on March 28th, same time. The meeting itself is going to be busier. We'll have things to vote on. The drafts of the reports will come out to council members a couple of weeks before the meeting, so you'll have a chance to look at them.
We need them by March 7th.
Okay. Right. So you'll have them to review prior to the meeting.
We need to have the reports to us 3 weeks ahead of time, before the meeting, so March
Right.
7th.
Right. Okay. So anyway, March 28th is the next meeting. It'll be here in D.C. In the meantime, please have a safe trip home. Enjoy a happy, warm holiday season, and we'll see you here in March.
Yeah. Happy New Year.